5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Part 2 in the Waiting Wise series. Some life lessons that we're learning from the wise men that were there around the time of Jesus' birth. Last week, we were talking about why the wise men were so wise. And of course, the answer is, well, it's simple. They searched the scriptures. They knew where the Lord was going to be born, not because they were raised knowing it, not because it was a part of their faith heritage or because someone took them to church. They knew because they saw the signs around them. They studied the stars. Of course, everybody could have looked up and seen the stars, but most people missed it. More importantly, they searched the scriptures. It's not always easy to understand the scriptures, but it's always worthwhile. And when we search the scriptures, we end up waiting for God to do what's next in our life. Wise. We know more about the nature of God and what he's up to while we patiently wait. That was part 1. Part 2 today, we're going to learn again from those wise men, but something very different. We're going to learn about the power of the tongue, what we say and how what we say directs what we think. I'd like to put it this way. Wait wise by talking trust instead of talking trash. You know people that talk trash, right? Big and cocky and egomaniacs, because to be completely honest, they're uncomfortable. People do all kinds of crazy things when they're uncomfortable. People say things that they later regret, and they do things that they later regret. Things that they might not even necessarily see coming. I was looking up some interesting examples of that online, and I found the actual definition to the word panic. When we panic, we do strange things. The definition for panic is this: a sudden or overwhelming fear with or without a cause, doesn't even have to have a good reason, that produces a hysterical or even irrational behavior, often spreading quickly through a group of people or animals. If you've ever been in a situation where you felt out of place or unprepared or insecure, then you know what I'm talking about. Panic sets in. And I've found over time that people say the craziest things when they're panicked. Things they don't even necessarily believe. They just kind of say. When we're uneasy, when we're unsure, when we're unfocused, our mouths and our attitudes and our actions kind of get a little crazy. When we're waiting for a thing to happen, it can seriously cause panic. Have you ever waited for something and then started to second guess and doubt? I waited for a bus one time in a city, and I stood there by that sign, and at first I was fairly confident that I was in the right place. But as the time passed, I started thinking to myself, am I in the right place? I'm checking my watch. I'm rechecking the sign. Waiting has a way of driving people crazy. And we've been waiting for Jesus to come back for over 2,000 years. Yeah, that's right. Christmas morn, as we remember it in the scriptures, happened over 2,000 years ago. And when Jesus was here, he certainly changed the world. And when he left, he said he'd come back. And Christians live in that faith, confident that Jesus is going to return for us someday. And if he doesn't come back first, we'll see him one day. Either way, he's going to do what he said. But sometimes we get a little freaked out in the waiting. Sometimes in the waiting, we get a little irrational. And we start to kind of talk trash instead of trust. People ask us how we feel about the Lord, and we kind of just hem and haw. Oh, well, I don't know. I don't take that stuff too serious. The next thing you know, we're thinking that way. Life lesson from the wise men: talk trust. In Matthew chapter 2, you remember the wise men went on a journey. They went looking for the newborn king. And where'd they go? Well, the city of the king. They went to Jerusalem, where all the religious people were and where King Herod was. And they walked right up to King Herod, and they said, and I quote, Matthew chapter 2, verse 2, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we've come to worship him." Those are bold words to say to a king. I mean, were they thinking they were going to get the King Herod just being all excited about the fact that there was a new king coming? I think not. But the wise men were bold. They didn't shy around it. They didn't get nervous with it. They didn't kind of just we're kind of looking for, and I think that's why the wise men saw amazing things, because their words talked trust. They were confident in what they believed, and they said it publicly. The result? Joy. The wise men were thrilled. In Matthew chapter 2, verses 9 to 11, they saw the newborn, and they gave him gifts, and they went away with exceeding joy. See what I'm saying? They talked trust. I bet you there were plenty of times on the journey that they maybe doubted, or they wondered what they were doing, but they just kept saying, we are here to see the King. That's what we're about. Christians would be wise to remind themselves every day by what they say that we are waiting for Jesus to return, and we're sure he's going to come, if not in our lifetime, at the end of our lifetime. I've been guilty of changing my answer sometimes. You don't want to test? Like I go in and I know the right answer and I put it down. And then I think. And then I second guess. And then I get insecure. And then I scratch out the answer that I put first and I put another, only to find out later that I should have stuck with what I knew. We've got to talk trust. When people ask you about your faith, what you believe, why, be ready with an answer. If you don't, well, the Bible gives us another example of someone that was even really close to Christ, but in the moment they kind of caved. That, of course, is Peter. And we're going to read about him together in Matthew chapter 26. So let me turn here. Matthew chapter 26, this is towards the end of Jesus' life. Verse 31, just before Jesus' crucifixion. On the way, Jesus told them, tonight all of you, his disciples and friends, will desert me. The scriptures say God's going to strike the shepherd, that was Jesus, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered, that was them. But after I've been raised from the dead, I'll go ahead of you to Galilee and I'll meet you there. But Peter declared, nah, even if everyone else deserts you, I won't desert you. Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times and say you don't even know me. No, Peter insisted, even if I have to die with you, I'll never deny you. And all the other disciples vowed the same. Good for Peter, good. He was talking trust. He was bold, but he'd soon fail. And I want you to see how that happened, because it happens to us. We start out so confident, so excited about a thing, and then we kind of lose focus of it. Christmas time, I'm thinking about Jesus. He's everywhere. And then by midsummer, it's hard to keep my focus on him. Let's fast forward over to verse 69. Jesus, of course, in between these verses, has been arrested, and the people scattered. And Peter kind of hung out in the corner because he was personally afraid. You see, Jesus got arrested, so what would happen to him? And then this happens. Meanwhile, Peter was sitting outside in a courtyard, while Jesus was being arrested and beaten and tried. And a servant girl came over and said to him, you were one of those ones that was with Jesus, the Galilean. A servant girl asked him. Servant girls have no power, man. But Peter was so freaked out in the moment that he denied it in front of everyone. No, I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Have you ever done that? I have, and it's the worst feeling in the world, where your faith caves. In just that moment, you stop talking trust and you start talking trash. And then all the joy disappears. Later, out by the gate, another servant girl noticed him and said to those standing around, no, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again, Peter denied it. And this time, he even took an oath. He swore. He said, I do not know the man Jesus, he said. A little later, some other strangers came over to Peter and they said, you must be one of them. You even sound like a Galilean. And then Peter swore, a curse on me if I'm lying. I do not know the man. What happens next? Jesus' words suddenly flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. You'll say you didn't even know me. And then he went away weeping bitterly. a pretty stark difference, isn't it? Between the wise men that kept talking trust, and then they saw Jesus, and then they gave him their gifts, and it was the greatest day of their life. And Peter, who started out well, but then just because of fear, kind of fell into the shadows. And then when he was given the opportunity to talk about his faith, he kind of chose to cower instead. And trash started coming out instead of trust. It's a really simple message. If you want to wait wise for Jesus to show up in your life, to do amazing things, then you've got to keep trusting him. By what you say, by what you show. If you don't, fear and doubt and insecurity and all kinds of ugliness creep in. And that's a lesson from the wise men. Wait wise by talking trust and not trash. He's coming again. I promise you that. I know that. I know it in my heart. I know it in the Word. I've seen it in God's Word, the Bible. I've studied it. I know it's true. There are days it doesn't feel true, but I know it's true. And I'm going to keep on saying it. And I hope you'll join me. God bless.